Good evening and welcome everybody to today's Property Cycles with David Clouter. We are here live from space, COVID safe, and David live from his library with his fantastic wife and supportive librarian. So we're going to share with you Property Cycles and precisely where we are in the property cycle and how COVID-19, a once-in-a-generational impact, is going to affect us. So, David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, Andrew. I'm going to pop up these slides every now and again, but it's much more interesting to see us. So I will do that now. We've got a beautiful slide here, which is, I think, this one, which I'm going to share with you now. And I hope you can see that. Feel free to message us if you can't and so forth. As Andrew says, I've never ever before said in one of my property cycles, we are here. But if ever I was going to do that, then now is the time, because we're in fairly sort of unprecedented times. There's extraordinary things going on in the world, and like with for example, Virgin Australia going into administration last night. You know, these are kind of things that I think nobody ever thought we'd see. And so
can I just suggest, David, that you hit the share screen button and show the slide that you've just brought to screen. You need to hit the share screen button.
I did. I'm now
big
hitting
green button at the bottom in the middle.
Yeah, I did hit that, and you were not seeing that then.
You have to hit share screen, click on the slide that you want to share, and then share to audience.
Yes, and share. So like this. Are you seeing that now, sir?
That should now be coming through on the live screen. Yes, that is correct.
Super.
Sorry,
Super.
I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I'm just trying to ensure the audience's experience is at its best.
Not at all, because I have to say that this is such a big talk that we're going to be roping you in the middle to help out with your experiences and stuff, Andrew, which is absolutely fabulous. And we'll flash these slides up from time to time, and then we'll make them go away again as well. So that'll be quite good fun. So what I was originally going to talk about today, because I thought it'd be quite nice with all of us being stuck at home, is I thought it would be nice to talk about this being the burning topic of the day. But bear in mind, I've just lost the slides by pressing escape, which was a real no-no. But anyway,
Go
so
to
I'm
the
gonna
bottom of the screen again, share screen, and click on the slide, and then hit the share button.
Yep. Okie dokie. Here we go. Isn't this the tech? You see, sorry folks, you see that this is super live, and there we are. I'll show you my little slides down the side as well, because then it's less confusing, you know, for me, if that's
if you
okay
go
with
to
them.
presenter mode, it'll stop everyone seeing you'll need to come out of that, go to presenter mode, and then hit the share. Otherwise, everyone can see all the slides that are coming.
Okay, so
Stop the share.
Life has never been this is such terrific fun, isn't it? Really, I'm having a whale of a time here, and apologies to everybody. Have you got the little tripod thing? Apologies to everybody for this
Right.
shaky start to things.
You need to share that.
Boy,
Follow what he's asking.
have we got some content to share with you today? So I'm going to stop sharing, yeah? Or I'm not sharing. Oh, dearie me.
I've stopped your sharing.
Thank you.
Go into presenter mode.
Right.
Then when you're in presenter mode, share the screen.
Right. So here we are in presenter mode. I'm now going back to it's lucky that we have you here today, Andrew, because otherwise, who knows, it might be a disaster. But as it is, it's going to be a whole bundle of fun. So here is a screen that I think is worthy of sharing, and there it is. And I've got my little toy here, which I will show you in a moment, so I can see what's going on as well. There it is, and we're all good to go, folks. So let's kick off with Property Cycles 2020. So yes, as I say, this is Property Cycles 2020. It's the emergency COVID special, as it were. And so what I'd like to do is to start you with this. I had thought that would be a wonderful idea to share. Are you seeing slide number 2, Andrew?
Yep, slide number 2 is live. Yeah.
So
that is
with us
correct.
all being stuck at home and with us all being, depressed and miserable and all of our tears and that kind of thing, I just thought the best thing to do would be for me to talk for a whole hour on indoor games to play with your dogs. How does that sound, Andrew?
I think that'll help us all get through this property cycle. Definitely.
It certainly will.
As you can tell, David and I have a great sense of humour, and you will have to bear with us for the first few slides because we're talking about lifestyle and lifestyle impact on you. Then we move on to the business side of things. Then we move on to the cycle, and at the end of the cycle, we do a wrap up and we share some really important stuff. And then we have a bonus section at the end coming up for you as well. Now, the bonus section, we haven't announced who our guest presenter is, but let's put it like this. This person puts Tony Robbins to shame. They make Tony Robbins look like a newbie.
Absolutely.
So,
that's totally correct. This person's schedule is so busy, in fact, that they're on all these international calls. It's 50-50 at the moment, whether they'll do it or I'll do it. But either way, it's going to be done. And it's got to be done.
Yeah,
right, now. Going on to this, the next slide then, that's that Olympian fella in the corner. That's me, and a very quick run through of my life. I'm a property investor, which I started doing in 1982. I've also done a lot of fun media things like being a DJ and all that kind of thing, and hanging out with all the rich and famous, and winning the Olympics, as you can see from the little slide there on the right. That's in Krakow in Poland last year. And crucially, the top thing on my bucket list was obviously spending the night in the cabin on the pirate radio ship Radio Caroline. I got to spend a couple of nights there because the boss got confused, put me in somebody else's cabin, and then somebody else came to bed at 2 o'clock and said, "Oi, hop it." So then I went to that boss, and he said, "Okay, you can have this one." So that was a rare treat indeed for me. And it's my very sad news actually to report that guy in the armchair there on the right hand side, he was the guy, and that's the good ship Radio Caroline, which I'm sure that Andrew's far too young to remember, but one of our 2 listeners may remember it. It was beaming out pop music all day long. It had 26 million listeners, and sadly, on Monday afternoon at 2 o'clock, the owner, the founder of that radio station, who you can see there in the picture reading the Irish Independent, he lost his life to pneumonia. There's no indication at the moment as to whether it was related with our current pandemic, but it just sort of adds to the fact that despite all the jokiness, this is very serious stuff here. Jokiness keeps us kind of keeps us alive, keeps us going. So I will continue to joke through the thing, but just let's be aware that there are kind of serious issues here. The obligatory disclaimer that I'm not providing any sort of professional advice whatsoever, including medical advice, although I'm about to tell you what I'm doing at home. But it's all provided in good faith for educational purposes, and we hope that you'll take it as it's intended. Now, the old property cycles talk that it has got 160 slides, so I've condensed those into 2. This is basically how a property cycle works. It goes round and round and round forever. And basically, credit goes up at the top of the picture to an unsustainable amount, and money's being handed out like Smarties, as I remember in like 2005. And then it all goes pop, and everything sort of tightens up. And then it all starts again because there are bargains to be had. And this goes sort of round and round and round indefinitely. If you haven't seen my property cycles talk, I did it. Do you know, it's a year since I came to the Great Property Meet and did it for you guys. So if anybody wanted to know more about that, but basically it runs like this. There's this curve which has a very, very long build up. I don't know if I'm doing this the right way around, and then it suddenly tips off quite suddenly. And I never really in this talk want to say to people where we are in the curve, because there's time to work it out. There isn't time to work it out now, and I was caught on the hoof. I had no idea. I don't know about you, Andrew. I had no idea what was about to hit us in January when we were all partying and everything. And then suddenly this rather innocuous virus seemingly came along, and 1 or 2 people died or something. And now we're seeing the full force of this. And everybody in March was looking up how exponential growth is. They were looking at charts of that and learning maths and all this. And now we're pretty clued up on this thing. It's nasty. And breaking news is actually that there are 30 different strains of this, at least. There was a paper published about 2 days ago by some researchers in China, including the lady who was the first researcher to call for the lockdown in China, and they suggest that there are aggressive strains and passive strains. And the bad news is that here in Europe we've got the aggressive strain, which is a lot worse. It's 300 times worse than some of the other countries, which is why you see the differences in the statistics. So in America they've got a fairly mild strain, except in New York, where they have a lot of visitors from Europe. So anyways, where we are at the moment, if you see phase 2 and phase 3 along the top around that chord, we're just past the little diamond at the top there. So we are, if you like, at the top of the waterfall. It's Niagara Falls, and we're oscillating in our little boat, and you know, we're going to take a tumble. But the good news is that we're not going to take an 18-month tumble. That's very, very unlikely, because all the fundamentals are still there. It's likely to be a short shock, but there will be some buying opportunities for property investors as those who have to sell up, and there we are. And here's another graph, since we're on graphs. Right, that was the property cycle stock. Boom, goodbye, we're right at the top. This is a very, very important graph that concerns us right now. We are all sitting at home. I'm sitting at home. Andrew's sitting in space, and his home is the space station. But you know, we're wondering when it's all going to end and what's going to happen. And basically, the government is dribbling out the information for us a little bit at a time. They are very much dependent on the science, and the scientists aren't 100% sure at the moment. But it doesn't look like we'll be coming out of lockdown now, because it would just peak again in July and overwhelm our health service. And the key to this is we mustn't overwhelm the health service. In Italy, we saw people over 65 being sedated and left to die because there weren't enough beds for them. And we're not in that situation here. We've got all these Nightingale hospitals, one of which was opened by Captain Tom recently, which is fabulous news. We'll come back to him in a minute. So we need to keep the number of cases to a manageable thing, especially since 3/4 of the people who end up in intensive care are men. So this is very close to our hearts, Andrew and mine. So we could do a lockdown until June, and again it would just push the surge a bit later, so it surges in July, because this is a very nasty, pesky little thing. So the likely thing is that we'll do, the likely outcome, but you know, no decision's been made yet, is that we will stay in lockdown until the beginning of June. This is my prediction. I'm going to do predictions, very hard predictions. We're not going to leave you to work it out. There's no time for that. And then the numbers will stay flat if we continue to do the social distancing. We're going to have to keep doing that until there's a cure, which in the optimistic scenario, there's some people working on it in Oxford, could be as early as September. If the government pull their finger out, we could have 1 million vaccines by then, which would be absolutely superb. The government had this idea, didn't they, in March, that we would get herd immunity from all infecting each other. But the fact that this virus is changing so quickly means that your immunity to this virus, if you've had it, and sorry to be the bearer of bad tidings, is likely to last a couple of weeks. So that doesn't work. That's ruled out. But the people working on the vaccine now know which novels on this thing to target, so they will make vaccines that last 2 or 3 years. And so we will be back in business and back up and running very soon. This is a website. There's the address on the top left, where they publish statistics and facts on this. So more than 2.5 million cases, 176,000 deaths, and at the moment, see, good news, 700,000 people have recovered. So you know, there's good in this. I keep, being a geeky fellow, I keep this spreadsheet which I update every day, and those reds in those columns, I look at the increases. I look at the 7-day moving averages, which is something I'd normally use to track equities, but why not track this? You know, those reds means decline, and as you can see, looking at column C, D, it's column F and the other one, column B, there are a lot, the red is starting to build, and that means it's plateauing. So that's what we got to do. We got to flatten that curve, because otherwise it just goes up like a space rocket and we end up with Andrew in the space station. So there are great stories coming out of this. There's a 106-year-old grandmother who left hospital having recovered for it, which is fabulous news. And there's the wonderful Captain Tom, who he's raised obviously far more than 18 million. I think it's 28 now, but that just shows you that I prepared this slide over the weekend, and it's going sort of astronomical. He's the oldest person in the country ever to have had a #1 hit single, which is an extraordinary achievement in itself. I mean, I would have sung it with him, but he chose Michael Ball. That was his loss. But what an astonishing effort by Captain Tom there. And this is a brand new.
What I'd like to chip in at that point, David, is I'm sure on your radio show on a Tuesday evening, Cam FM, that you will be playing Captain Tom's tune next week.
Absolutely, no question about that. That'll be we'll probably play it 3 times. That's a good call. Now, look, this is a very powerful message that I saw on Facebook this morning. This doctor and this nurse were due to be getting married, but instead they're saving our lives by working themselves silly in intensive care, helping people, and all we got to do to help them is just stay at home, sitting in the armchair and watching Netflix. So it's really not a big ask. And this brings us on to today's agenda. There are 4 or 5 things that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about staying alive. That's the most important thing of all, because if you pop your clogs, none of the other is important at all. And it's up there, is it, Andrew? I think, or it might be up there. That we have to.
We're staying alive, aren't we? Certainly staying alive.
Oh, cool. I thought, yeah, we come to that in a second. Ho, 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 staying alive. But I thought there's a thing we have to push a bell icon or something to subscribe. Do that, because apart from me, I was the one that slipped through. But apart from me, Andrew has some fantastic people on his channel here on YouTube, so you'll really want to see them. Staying in business is quite important, and Andrew and I are going to be joining forces to drill down on that, on all the sort of property and investment strategies that are currently out there. Staying sane, we may be joined by our special guest, or I may have to do that section, and we'll also be looking at the future. So Mr. Spock from Star Trek is going to help us with that one, as we predict what it'll be like, what kind of world will emerge to. Will there be Klingons out there? We're going to look at that in detail. But here we are with the old BGs with their very high voices, and yeah, absolutely. So we're kind of boogieing along to that, and so I'm going to do this bit very quickly. It's what I've done at home. I was talking to one of the other very well-known names in property yesterday on Messenger, and he is doing exactly the same as me, and we came up with this independently, and it's based on kind of what happens in hospital. If you go to A&E at the moment, and not many people are going to A&E, I think if I sprained my ankle, I would probably stay at home now. They've set up separate areas, which you can see on the left of the screen, where people who are not, this is a general procedure they have. People, when there's some kind of infection, there's the green route is where the uninfected people go. The red route is where the infection is. In the hospitals now, in accident and emergency, they have got separate entrances for you to come in and separate staff to make sure there's no transfer between the two areas of the COVID and COVID suspected cases, and the clean areas for people who just sprained their ankles. So kind of, that's very reassuring. So I thought, let's extend that to the home. So I've set up a hot zone. That's not actually, that's a stock image from Google, but it kind of illustrates, mine isn't that tidy, but that illustrates what we're doing at home. The dirty shoes never get beyond about 6 inches from the door. The outside clothes go into a basket, just the outer layers. The keys, the phones, and the wallets go into a little plastic tray. And we have disinfectant products, and you can make your own. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be antibacterial. It basically has to be soap and water. We'll talk about that in a minute. And that is the hot zone. And then and the shopping stays in the hot zone as well, and the shopping comes out of the hot zone one item at a time, or 2 items at a time. I walk down the kitchen, I open the wrapping, and without touching what's in there, I tip it into a little tray, and then we sort that out once I've washed my hands. So because people in the supermarkets are handling stuff and then sneezing, and Asda and Aldi today issued a request for all their esteemed customers to not do that, to not pick up shopping that they're not going to buy, which I think is quite sensible. We can't be 100% sure. But then in the cold zone and the rest of my house, I'm absolutely sure that there are no viruses lurking, and blah, blah, blah. So again, this is a sort of summary slide of what I've just said, and keep that hot. It's very important. Letters that come in as well, assume that they are hot, and open them very carefully and pull out the contents and leave those letters on the mat. And just every day I come to the mat, pick everything there and take it out into the trash, and then wash my hands. And again, plastic tray. The sanitizing spray can be very easy to make yourself. You don't need some fancy product that you'll buy for 25 quid off online. We just put a few drops of washing up liquid, because this virus has a weakness. It's covered in this thing called lipid, which is a layer of fat, and inside it is the important stuff, the building blocks, the RNA. Then there are these spikes. If you wash your hands, the lipid just dissolves, all the little spikes fall to the floor, and the thing inside has no way to get into your body. So just, we wash the old hands, and if you've got any suggestions for songs we can sing, Andrew, then while we're doing that, it's all good, because it's not my birthday now, so I can't sing happy birthday twice. And there you go. So you put those items in the tray, your phone and all those kind of things. I try and leave my phone at home actually when I go out, and I pay contactless. I'm not using cash anymore. All those little things. But right outside my front door, even on the handle on the outside, I assume it's a hot zone. I'm in a war zone, and as soon as I touch something with one hand, then that hand's hot. This hand is cold at the moment, so I can still scratch my nose, but then as soon as I've touched something, I'm hot. And that's it. And I sort of go into the supermarket like a ninja. I'm in and out. I had a case of another lady in property who got COVID because she was standing in a queue in one of the supermarkets for about half an hour, albeit on the crosses. You don't want to do that. If there's a queue, just go home, leave the trolley. Sorry, supermarkets, but just go in and out and shake it all about. So disinfect the old shoes, but don't use nice ones, because if you've got a bit of bleach in there, it might discolor them. So don't come to me if you do. Keep the house as clean as you possibly can, and disinfect those floors. Again, I have slippers that I wear downstairs, and as soon as I step onto the staircase to go upstairs, I leave them there. So we're leaving all the nasties kind of downstairs. We're washing all the shopping. Every at least 20 seconds we're doing that hand washing. Sorry to sort of reinforce this, but it's very, very, very important. We're not loitering around in parks, we're not hanging around with mates, all that kind of thing. It's very, very important, and these numbers are coming down. There was a big number yesterday, but that was just catching up with cases going back to March. They had a few, it was just paperwork tidying exercise, but on the whole, the number of deaths are going down. That's what we're going to do, because it's not only you and me, Andrew, it's our uncles and parents and all these kind of people that we're protecting. We're protecting the weak. Plus, the young and healthy have also, especially if they're males, they've also got a chance of popping off. Out of every 1,000 deaths, about 50 of them are people who are outside the at-risk age group with no medical conditions. So, there we are, staying alive in the supermarket. And that's a doctor on YouTube at youtube.be/ZMO capital BI5 M2_UW. I hope you got that. Just give you a second to write that down. And he demonstrates in his kitchen how we need to have a hot zone and a cold zone to avoid getting bugs. I spoke to a friend of mine who's an A&E doctor on Saturday. We did a live. I said to him, is that sensible? He said, very, very sensible, because, really, we're all at risk from this. And by working together as a nation, we do it. And number two, wash the old hands and look after yourself and love those around you. Meet up with people often online, and then you'll stay alive and safe. Number two is staying in business. I'm going to be joined by my good friend Andrew on this one, and so I think I'll put us on the screen and we'll work through these. But there are general principles here, which is to minimize your outgoings, to maximize your income, to restructure your business as necessary, to de-risk, and to explore new avenues. So let's stop sharing the screen for a bit. And let's drill down on those, shall we, Andrew?
Absolutely. Well, what I'm going to do is just share the view that I've got here. So that should come up to YouTube now. Now, staying in business, where do we want to start with minimizing outgoings? Do you want to kick that one off, David, or shall I?
Shall we do a bit each? Should I just put our thoughts in? Shall I start a bit with outgoings? You've got fixed outgoings and you've got variable outgoings. You may, in terms of business premises or whatever, you may be able to get some reliefs on those. In fact, you almost certainly will. So grab these sort of things to try and release fixed outgoings. You've got variable outgoings, which might be your electricity, your gas, and your broadband and all that kind of thing. Again, talk to these guys. Remember that every year when you come to renew the insurance, it goes up, so you need to quote, and then you need to negotiate, and that's your area, Andrew, to sort of get these costs down. If you ring up Sky or Virgin or something telling you you're leaving, suddenly the price halves in about a second, so you'll be surprised what you can achieve. And again, with insurance companies, they're slowly creeping it up. You can get it down.
Yeah, well, with regards to minimizing outgoings, I'd echo everything you've said there. I'd also look at it from the point of view that there are things like payment deferrals on your mortgages. There are questions about whether it'll be good or bad for your credit long term. But the key thing is you need to minimize those outgoings. And we're talking about this from a business perspective here. So it might be you employ staff. If you have employed them, then and they're furloughed, make sure you've got your furlough claim in. The claims could go in on Monday of this week. I submitted my claims for the furlough, so I suggest if you haven't done, you do it. It's very easy. It's a radio button tick box exercise. Have you complied with the rules? If you've complied with the rules, what is the amount of money you're claiming? And then just enter the employee's name that you're claiming for and their national insurance number, and then just tick the button to say that you've complied with the rules, and then the claim is in. And HMRC are claiming they will get the cash to your bank account within 6 days. 6 days, which is good because they've brought it forward, and that means the funds should be there to pay this month's payroll. So you've just reduced your costs by 80%. You're keeping people in a job, therefore able to help with future employment. Now, another thing you can do to minimize costs is actually a raise in income one. If you have business premises and the business premises have a rateable value of less than £51,000, then you'll be eligible for a £25,000 grant, directly cash injected straight into your business. If your business premises are less than £15,000 rateable value, you automatically qualify for a £10,000 grant. All you need to do is go to the local authority's website, and again, I've done this. You enter the reference number for your property, your bill reference, which you can find on your last business rate council tax bill, and submit a claim there. It literally is about 3 minutes of clicking a couple of buttons, entering your unique taxpayer reference, your business name, and your bank account details, and the funds come back in within about 7 days. So they're really great ways of not only reducing your costs, because on the business rate, our business rates exempt for the next 12 months, but you also get a cash back into your bank account. And I think that's a very important thing. So that's what I would add on to what David said there, which is about reducing your costs. It's also putting some cash in the tank as well at the same time.
Yes, and so we've covered a big chunk of number 2, really, haven't we, as well, which is maximising your income. So getting that money coming in is just as important as keeping the money coming out. So again, if you've got tenants, see, what do you think? Should you talk to the tenants and raise the concern with them, which might lead to some of them thinking that they can default, or should you wait until they approach you? I mean, this is a matter of debate, isn't it?
It certainly is a matter of debate. I've worked on the premise that, number one, put a strong communication out there in terms of your position as a landlord. Number two, if anybody does approach you for a payment deferral, it's not a holiday, it's a deferral. You point out it's not an automatic right. They have to agree to a payment plan. And before you do that, and I've released a couple of videos on this elsewhere, you can actually see, number one, what their income is. Number two, what their expenditure is. Number three, what help is available to them. So if they've been furloughed, they might be entitled to enhanced housing allowance, part of the universal credit. They might be entitled to universal credit. They might have a redundancy payment. They've got 80% of income on furlough. Not only that, as a tenant, they're now not going out to the cinema. They're not going for meals. They're not spending in cost of coffee. Their income has nosedived. So you need to help them to actually assess their cash flow. And then should you decide that they're £20, £30 a month short, they sign an agreement with you as to the fact that you are deferring £30 a month, and their catch-up plan, the most important bit, the catch-up plan when they will be paying this is this, and therefore you've got a legal document that they've signed, you've signed, and if they don't stick to that, you have grounds for rent arrears and a claim against them, which if you're sat there in front of the man or the lady that wears the wig in front of a bench, you can present evidence to them that they're in breach of their agreement with you. So that's what I would sort of add to what David said there. But I'd also bring in at this point a really important thing. Now, a person who I had on a webinar this week was a gentleman called Daniel Hill. He's got a website, and I'll put it in the comments box down below very shortly. about the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme. He has had 3 accepted by Monday and cash in his bank on Monday for a 6-figure sum. Not only that, he's had another 3 accepted since then, and he's got a series of applications in. Now, the first thing about the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme is the first year is 0% interest. There are no fees for application. The government underwrites for the whole term of the loan 80% of that debt. If your loan is under £250,000, there is no personal guarantee from you. Therefore, this is very good money. Now, you might say, what happens, what's the interest rates for years 2 to 6? It must be punitive. Well, actually, it's not a punitive interest rate. What it actually is a really decent rate of interest. I know somebody who secured it at 2% fixed for 5 years. Daniel secured his between 2.4 and I think it was 3.5 for 5 years. And the most expensive I've come across so far is 6%. So that is a gift being given to you. By Sunday of this week, 3,000 businesses had the cash deposited into their bank account. Sorry, 6,000 businesses have had the cash deposited into their bank account. By Monday night, another 6,000. So 6,000 businesses in one day, doubling it to 12,000 businesses, had the money in their bank account by Monday night. By Friday of this week, effectively payday, the banks are under an awful lot of pressure by government. Government want positive headlines. This is happening. It's happening fast. Get your applications in fast now for the coronavirus business scheme. The place to go is british-business-bank.co.uk. There are 40 banks registered. 40 banks registered giving out these loans. Get in there fast. That's free money for you. David, carry on.
It's a wonderful idea. Yes. So now we've cut down the money going out and we've maximized the money coming in, some of which will be via loans. So the next thing is maybe to sit back for a moment, because we're all out of breath with all this stuff we're doing, but to see if there are ways we can maybe restructure our businesses to make them more efficient.
Absolutely. And I was talking to a managing director of a reasonably large regional estate agent yesterday, and they have said that they've actually reviewed their working practices. They're now no longer going in the future to be doing face-to-face team meetings with their staff. They're going to do them on Zoom. The reason they're going to do them on Zoom is they found that everybody is so much more efficient. The meetings are more punchy, and they don't waffle and drivel on. I was talking to a GP practice, and the partners meet after hours to do their GP surgery. And what they're doing is they've said, actually, we're all going to go home, and we're going to do this on Zoom because we can have some food then. And rather than getting home at 10 p.m. in the evening, we can get home, we can eat while we're doing the meeting, and actually have a better quality of life. And I think there is going to be a lot of businesses reviewing their situation. If we look at traditional offices, traditionally we've leased spaces, 5, 10, 25-year leases, possibly with 5-year break clauses. Now, if you wound the clock back to the year 2000, we had great big 1,800 by 600 desks, we had CRT monitors. Nowadays, we're doing everything in the cloud. Not only are we doing it in the cloud, we're walking around and it's pretty much all on our phone or a tablet, so we don't need big desks. Those metal cabinets or wooden cabinets that we used to stick all that paper in, we're now filing and storing all of that in the cloud. So all of these things are changing. And I think this will cause businesses to evaluate when they come to the end of their leases, how they do things with immediate effect going into the future. So businesses are going to restructure around this. Retailers are restructuring. You only have to have a look. There's a few retailers gone under. Jules's, Debenhams, Mothercare haven't gone under, but what they've said is they're slashing the number of stores. And I think a lot of retailers are going to use this as an excuse to restructure their portfolios and slash their store bases. In addition to that, you need to have a look at, if you're in commercial property, who your commercial tenants are. If you're, I would make a prediction at this point as part of the cycle that town centres as we know them, they've struggled for a while. And I think they're going to become ghost towns to a large extent because the major stores, Marks and Spencer's have pulled out of a lot of sites. Debenhams is now closed. You've got other retailers also closing sites or closing down. And that's because online, the tin shed is shipping them very quickly and easily to sites. But what I would look at is secondary high streets are going to thrive because they have experiential type businesses, hairdressers, tattoo parlors. They have Costa coffees, cafes. These places are hubs for people. And because the large stores are closing in the town centres, that's going to cause a vacuum. And it's going to force businesses out into these secondary areas, is one of my predictions. But carry on, Dave. That's one of my hobby horses.
You forgot nail bars.
Yeah, absolutely. and eyebrows and stuff. I need to get mine done looking at this. Sorry. Carry on.
I've got this Turkish barber I go to sometimes, and he does this thing with it like a blowtorch. It's only a tiny little one, but and then he sort of immediately puts it out with a flannel. But anyway, so fireman. Now, another thing that we can do, and we'll come back and revisit some of this later in the talk, is how do we reduce risk overall in our business? Because mitigating risk is another very, very important thing for businesses at all times. And we can see now some risks which weren't there 6 weeks ago. I'm kind of staring us in the face in a sense.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is an opportunity where businesses really are going to be reviewing quite considerably how they do things. Now, ironically, for probably 10 plus years, I had a disaster recovery plan. And one of my disaster recovery plans was to look at my internet. And I always had two providers. I had a fiber provider, Virgin, and I also had a traditional line provider via BT. And actually, they came into opposite ends of the building. Now, about 5 years ago, I went, I've had this for about 15 years in place. I've been paying for it and not using the spare capacity. I'm going to ditch the one provider. Ditch the one provider. Coronavirus hits. My other provider only goes and has an outage. So for 24 hours, I was without internet.
Oh, dear.
Now, I'm reviewing my business recovery plans again and saying, times like this, I wish I'd kept that in place. But I think teams, business structures, how businesses are doing things are going to be changed. And we're all going to review our risk policies within our businesses. I think this is a once in a generation, and we mustn't lose sight of that. This is not a normal activity. I've been around like David 1 or 2 years, gone a little bit grey, you can probably tell during that time. And what I would note and have noted over that time is cycles come and cycles go. And that's why we're here, is sharing our experience and wisdom on the cycles. And this is a cycle I've never seen before. I've analysed previous cycles. The last crash wasn't actually anything to do with general businesses. It was to do with banks overlending, banks securitizing things that weren't securities, and the banks basically went and picked on businesses with weak balance sheets. You go back to the 2000 recession, that was all about tech companies. You go back prior to that to the 90s. So each recession has a thing that it's about. I would not describe us as being in a recession at the moment. And I think there's a lot of things that are going to come out that we'll cover later in the talk that are going to make this very different to anything you've ever experienced before.
Yes, I agree. And I think we've got to, moving forward, take the positives from the experience we've had now and use them to build a new world for our businesses, for ourselves, for our children moving forward. But again, we'll talk about that a bit more at the end. And just, one final general point before we sort of drill down on the strategies, because we're obviously watching the clock here. We don't want to keep you guys going forever, but exploring new opportunities in business, and we've sort of touched on this. That there will be new avenues that open up that weren't there before.
Absolutely. And while we're talking about the clock and being careful of people's time, this is a live YouTube, so there's a live chat box, and we will be taking questions at the end. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat box, because we will answer those at the end for you, or if appropriate, we'll stop and interject to answer questions. So please feel free to put questions in that chat box. And obviously, let us know that you can hear us. I can see there's a number of people on. So just give us a ding and let us know that you can hear the audio and you can see the video from us.
So yes, so as I say, in general, in business, into this new world, we're going to, off the top of your head, are there some new opportunities out there that you think people should seize?
Well, it's an interesting one, because I'm sort of seeing growth in products like the Zoom, and we were talking about a different platform that's also been developed at lightning speed to launch out there. And I think the launch was this weekend. That's a rival to Zoom. We've also seen, and I think this was something else that you've come across, David, yourself, which was a technology platform to create a remote parliament system. So there's all sorts of opportunities springing up in the tech field. I think working practices will change it. If I took us back 10 years and said, we were going to be social media superstars, or we were going to have social media engineers, everybody would go, what are you on about? Because Facebook didn't really exist. Social media didn't really exist. New industries are going to spring up off the back of this. And it's those people, and it's looking for those innovative gaps in the marketplace that will let us know where the future is going. And I think speed of change is one thing we can be certain of. There's going to be more change. There will be more disruption in the future, and it's businesses that are more fleet of foot that will be able to seize and take advantage of this.
I agree. I think that flexibility is definitely the key moving forward. I'm just going to flash up a little slide for a minute if I can work out how to do it, just for a second, and then we'll come back to us. So this is what we're going to do. This is the first thing we're going to talk about now: how to stay in business with our vanilla buy-to-lets. And if I can again work out how to do it, I can actually change that slide with a bit of luck. So these are some points that I think we'll talk about again in the context of what we've been saying earlier. So in the context of saving money, in the context of preserving our income, in the context of do we need a restructure if we've only got sort of one property, say, in the response of de-risking, and equally to look finally at some opportunities that might be there in the vanilla buy-to-let sector. So number one was the thing about saving some outgoings, and as we deal with the specifics, it's all of the stuff we were talking about before in general business terms plus. So if you've got one buy-to-let, you might consider managing it yourself. Every time you have to change a light bulb, the electrician's going to charge you 25 quid. So if it's just at the end of the road, go around there yourself with your stepladder, change it yourself. Subject to, if you're vulnerable to this virus, don't. So there's a big caveat like that. If you have to stay at home, as I'll have to do until there's a cure, then you can't do that. But if you can, that's something to look at perhaps, and there might be other areas to save money there. Do feel free to jump in, Andrew, at any point.
Yes, no, well, I was going to say, if I can share some experience of a portfolio we have in Coventry, and what I've basically said to my team is, and to all of the occupiers of the properties, is basically we will not be attending site unless it is an emergency. And an emergency will be something like a gas leak, a major failure that will make the house uninhabitable. Minor things such as a light bulb, we're sitting there and we're either directing people to YouTube videos and saying, really, really sorry about this, but in your interest of safety and the interest of our workers' safety, we are not sending people to site. So you will either have to work without the light bulb for a little while or watch this video and install the light bulb yourself. And if they don't have light bulbs, we will drop ship one from somewhere like Amazon or other online retailers exist so that they can do that themselves. But we're not attending any sites. We've communicated that proactively, and it's purely from a safety perspective.
It's a very sensible win-win policy that benefits everyone because this virus doesn't have the symptoms to start with. You don't know whether the fella coming to your home to have to change the light bulb has got it, or whether you've got it. And either way, there's going to be a sort of a friendly interchange there of viruses, which we really don't want. So
No, totally.
yeah. So number two was about sort of maintaining the income stream, and of course for tenants there is financial help that they can obtain if they've been laid off or furloughed or something that they might not all be acquainted with.
Absolutely. I mean, well, let's put it like this. I won't repeat what I said earlier, but you need to sit there with your tenant and help them apply for things, because often people will turn around and I'm not being rude, most people are lazy. The people on this webinar are not, no, the people on this webinar are not lazy. The reason being, we're entrepreneurs. We're actually out there, and what we are doing is we are creating wealth for this country and creating a future. And as part of that, we are, generally speaking, researchers. We find out information and then we garner that information to actually help us enable our business to be more powerful, profitable, successful. Now, in this instance, we need to be doing the research on behalf of our tenants and telling them what their rights are and what access they have, and perhaps even filling the forms in for them, getting them a council tax exemption, getting them application forms for universal credit, housing allowances. All these things are open to them, but sometimes they need spoon feeding. The reason they are generally employees and furloughed is because they like to be told what to do. Whereas us as entrepreneurs, we're leaders and we need to be sharing with them, as their boss ordinarily would in a day-to-day environment, what they need to be doing. So that's how I'm approaching it, very proactively, and it's working so far. And those who I've shared and supported on this, it's also worked for them.
Now, in terms of, again, your vanilla buy-to-let, which is the first one on our list, we talk about sort of restructuring. Now, probably most people have heard about George Osborne and who he was and what he did by restricting mortgage interest tax relief. But it's not quite as clear-cut as all that, is it? Because if you've only got your one buy-to-let property down the road, which is just a shed, really, with a felt roof, and you've got some chickens staying there, it might not be cost-effective to incorporate, because the cost of incorporation and the cost of getting the accounts done every year and the cost of probably paying a bit more for the mortgage might outweigh the savings that you're going to get in tax.
It totally will. I mean, it's an area I could probably do a whole session on this because I have a little bit of knowledge. But what it's worth doing, and what I'll do, I'll put in the comments box below some links to some resources and some videos around this specific subject. I've done a very, very popular video with Mark Smith on this YouTube channel, all about the taxation and how you can save. And it's not just one size doesn't fit all. The thing I say, and I'm an accountant, the thing I say about this is David's starting point, where we are today, and my starting point are very different. His portfolio is different to mine. My portfolio is different to his. David's exit from his business will also be different to mine. And as a result, we've got different start points, different end points. Therefore, the tax strategy won't fit the same for the two of us. So we need to make the tax strategy fit each one. And by doing that, I'll share some links below, and I won't deep dive into the detail because it's not appropriate in this. This is about the property cycle.
Oh, absolutely.
And you can gain all of the knowledge from those other videos.
But see, it's like you wouldn't go to the doctor and then say, well, what medicine do I take? It's a bit like that, isn't it, really? So the doctor's going to say, well, what seems to be the problem? How long has it been going on? Blah, blah, blah. And it's exactly the same with property.
Absolutely. Ian. And what I would certainly say is it's worth doing. I know on Monday night I did a session with Mark Alexander, and he talked about the property and the tax side there. I'm also doing another dedicated session with Mark Alexander coming up. So there'll be a lot of detail coming through from this channel, specifically from Mark Alexander, and I'll put web links below so that you can reference all of the materials that I've got and that I work on.
This is fast becoming the go-to place for all that kind of really rich content.
Absolutely.
Now, so next thing with the old vanilla buy-to-let then is how do we de-risk our buy-to-let business? You know, what are the risks and how do we mitigate them and minimize them?
Well, for me, it's always about looking at your buildings, the properties, and looking at different uses for them. Now, if you're a plain vanilla buy-to-let landlord, it might be that you sit there and say, I've had enough. Therefore, you might bring an operator in or a manager in to take that day-to-day off you. And, you know, you might deem it rent to rent, for example, rent to SA. You could do this yourself. You could convert it to a HMO. You could potentially convert it to a serviced accommodation. It is property specific and you need to look at it. And I'm not necessarily advocating any of these strategies. This is just alternate uses.
Oh,
it could be you look at the property and you say, well, under permitted development rights, I can add some square footage to the rear of the property, which would increase the floor space and therefore turn it from a 2-bed to a 3-bed or give it more habitable space inside. It could be you look at the property and you split it. You could either split it floor by floor or down the middle and make it into 2 properties, flats, maisonettes, whatever. And I know that David and I have deep dived into this again on this channel in the A to Z of property strategies, where you can find a lot more ideas and information on this. So, I mean, I'll stop waffling because it sounds like I'm plugging this channel, but I'm actually not. I'm trying to give you valuable information without necessarily deep diving everything.
That's why for this bit of the talk, with you being the smart guy, I've turned into the interviewer. You may have noticed this. Are you a fan of?
Well, I have noticed. Thank you.
But because I want the best possible advice for people to have, and so you know. Now, are you a fan? Also talking about de-risking over time. You know, once we've decided how many properties we need, whether it's 1 or 5 or 10, of doing some net cash flow reinvestment, of putting some money back that comes in through the rents to pay down the loans over time, and make and kind of like de-risk it. Because I'll tell you a quick anecdotal story. I've got these friends in Texas, in Lubbock, the home of Buddy Holly, although he's sadly no longer with us, and some terrific people. I must send them a message actually, see how they're getting on. But Rick and Holly, who are now the biggest developers in Texas, only because prior to the meltdown of 2007, they'd paid down all their loans out of cash flow, so they owned the business. All the competitors, the banks, once the interbank lending had frozen and all this kind of thing to balance their books, pulled the loans. All the developments went pop. The demand was still there, so everybody went to that company, and they now start 3 new builds a day with an end value when it drops off the end of the conveyor belt to their company of $300,000.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with what they've done there, but again, this comes down to cycles, and I do wholeheartedly agree in reducing down the debt load. And there are different cycles. The general property cycle overall, but there's also your investor cycle where you are. And if you're starting out, you're probably quite highly geared and highly leveraged and going up all the time. You'll reach a point where you plateau and you realise you've got the level of income that you want, so you stabilise, and then that's the time to start paying down the debt. Now, where we are in the de-risk side of the cycle at the moment, those who have de-risked and lowered their gearing quite considerably are at a massive advantage, because what I'm predicting is coming up, and hold me back a little bit if I'm jumping too many slides forward here, David, but excellent. What I'm predicting basically is the next 9 to 18 months are going to be the best buying opportunity that there ever has been. Now, if you're a highly geared investor, this is going to hold you back a little bit. But those investors who've got cash and large amounts of cash are going to succeed, or large amounts of assets. Now, you can do this in one of a couple of ways. You can go and remortgage existing properties with low loan to value. Take cash out so you can become a cash buyer. Or what you can do, and people might put comments on the chat box here about, you can't do that at the moment because they're not going out in value. 90% of existing mortgage lenders who you've got your existing mortgage with will do a desktop remortgage for you. And they will do that without sending a valuer out. So it can be done. It's done on a desktop, and it's a few button clicks. You can apply for these online through your existing lender. Generally speaking, they have a specific web page for remortgage my existing product.
It's important to note as well sorry. Everything is possible. Everything is possible. Sorry to interrupt. And like right at the bottom of the credit crunch, I was getting loans, but they just weren't at the usual sort of loan to value that you might expect. They might have been 10 or 20%, but it helped me to buy 10 or 20% more property.
Absolutely. And then you gear up on those properties.
Later.
You're getting a disproportional amount of revenue from them. But the other thing that you can do is you don't necessarily need to remortgage now. If you've got low geared assets, 50% or lower loan to values, then what you can do is apply for a 100% mortgage on your next acquisition. And your lender will put a second charge, and they'll be happy with a second charge up to 75% loan to value, generally speaking, on that second property. So you can use the other property that's low geared or with no mortgage on as a guarantee for something that you're acquiring. And you can therefore act fast. Cash is slightly better because you can act much quicker and therefore more responsive. But I would also say you don't necessarily need the cash, because creative strategies are going to be a big thing over the next 18 months, 2 years. So this is lease options, creative deals, EDCs, exchange and delayed completion. And we've covered these in the A to Z of properties again, so I won't go into detail. Go over and have a look at those other videos when this one's finished.
Yes, I can completely agree with you, and I'm with you 100%. And then there are hunter loans. If you've got unencumbered properties, you can just get agreement in principle to borrow against them. So there's lots of. I think we haven't come to H yet, so we'll come to that on our A to Z. It's turning into a terribly long A to Z because we're about 4 months in, and we're up to about the letter E, is it? I think so. So you know, we'll be doing that for the foreseeable. I think I'll be drawing my pension before we finish that one.
Well, here we're in Hawaii this week. And then we're on an ice mountain the week after, and then we're visiting the moon, and we're also with some dinosaurs untold. So yeah, watch out.
It's all very. Whoa, there's a T-Rex. Now, the final thing in the vanilla buy-to-let is to look for opportunities. There will be landlords selling.
Totally. And there are landlords who are going to be selling, A, because they're fed up with the legislation, the taxation, the fact that if you actually read Rishi Sunak's announcement regarding the rent holiday, as he referred to it, which is actually a payment deferral, his statement was, we do not want any tenant to be financially disadvantaged. We also do not want landlords to be too hard done by. And it was the bit that actually he's moving the pain from the tenant to the landlord. And if you read the exact wording in the statement, I can't remember the quote, but it was like, Well, landlords can afford to take a little bit of the pain, whereas tenants can't. So be very careful.
Because see, tenants are voters and landlords are voters, but there are more tenants. So that's my slightly cynical viewpoint. But it's time to share the old screen again for a split second, if I may, if I can work out how to do it. Here we go. It's all very exciting, isn't it? And that's the that's the screen we want to share. I'm getting good at this. So the next thing business strategy we're going to consider is a buy-to-lets, and whether there are specifics there that we can drill into. Again, we're talking about with a view to I can't go into the next one, but I'm sure I will be able to in a second. Oh yeah, no, we don't know, we're not at that one yet. Goodness gracious me, when the tech goes wrong. So we're looking again with HMOs at fixed recurring costs, at keeping the outgoings down, at restructuring, de-risking, and possibly looking at other areas that we can go into. And I think we'll come out of that, and we'll go to stop the share before we go on to preempt what the next one is. I think, again, this is very similar to some of the other strategies that we've been discussing, but there are perhaps one or two areas to consider. So again, reducing all the outgoings in the way that we've mentioned for the other things, but also with HMOs, given that we're paying the bills and the tenants are turning all the heating up full whack, maybe there's some tech we can put in to help with that.
Yeah, well, with the HMOs, you can't control their living environments because that would be deemed as harassment. However, you can put products in that have caps, collars, and limiters. And one of those products that is endorsed by the RLA and NLA, or now the NRLA, if I can get my letters in the right order, is a product called Thermostat. Now, lots of landlords go, oh, I'd like to see what the temperature is and monitor it and be able to influence it. If you do that, you put yourself at risk of not being able to collect rent, being in breach of harassment, and that could lead to a rent repayment order for the period of the whole of the tenant's tenancy. The Thermostat is a device that sits in the property. It has a cap and a collar. Basically, the cap stops the temperature dropping below a certain level, so you never get frozen pipes, and keeps it within the legal minimum that the temperature can be in that building. And the collar sets the maximum temperature that you wish the building to go to, which again is set at the safe legal minimum for a maximum. So the tenant can boost by pressing the plus button, and they get 1 extra hour's heating. Therefore, if they go out and they leave the windows open and it's feeling a bit like you're in Hawaii and your wallet's going out the window with a nice breeze blowing through, after an hour it turns off. So you've only lost 1 hour's worth of heat. But what it does is actually trains the tenant. So that's one area of tech that you can use to minimise your costs. But again, referring to another one here, and David mentioned landlords paying the bills. Landlords pay the bills for HMOs, such as council tax, for example. And I've got a video on how you can avoid your HMO being rebanded to Band A for each and every individual room. So look on the channel and you'll find the details of that video on there. That's a video that's had several thousand watches, loads of comments, and helps and shares with you some real great pointers. Now, the other thing is, should you get rebanded to Band A, then actually it's the tenant who is liable under the General Rate Act 1967 for the council tax on that room. So it's not the end of the world to you as the landlord. You pop in to the council the name of the occupier, because they are the person legally responsible for paying that council tax. And guess what? No longer your bill. Now, why do I mention that? I mention that because what we're finding is, or what I think we will find post this at the end of the COVID lockdown, is HMO rooms with en suite or dry kitchenettes starting to become more in demand, because people who have been in lockdown will be going, actually, do you know what? I really don't want to share a bathroom with people, because if I'm needing to wash my hands every 20 seconds, and going back to what David said about doorknobs being hot and not hot and so forth, I'd actually rather stay in my own self-contained room and not mix with anybody else. So I think we will see an upswing in demand for rooms with ensuite. Rooms with ensuite, I can see councils as part of their revenue raising, because there will be a bit of revenue raising going on after this lockdown, because so many grants have been given out by councils and government that they will start to jump on this band-aid on HMO rooms, and therefore that will put council tax bills up. But you need to push that directly onto the tenants. And I would advise, if you haven't done already, and I started advising on this back in about 2015, amend your ASPs for HMOs to say that the council tax is their responsibility should the rooms get rebanded, because this legislation went through back in 2015. Go and look on legislation.gov.uk for the facts.
Yes, that all seems
off my soapbox.
very sensible moving forward. And another area in HMOs, and I was looking at a video on the BBC website of some survivors of the Spanish flu in 1918, and they said it took a long time for people to be comfortable again and to mix and mingle. And I think the thing you did most often then was go to church and all that, but the pews were empty for 3 or 4 years. And I see this as affecting the sector insofar as, first of all, I think that HMOs will benefit to the detriment of co-living, because people will probably stay in their rooms a bit more. That they'll value that security. But also, I see a risk in an HMO when you move somebody new in, that everybody else moves out. Is there any way to mitigate that, do you think?
I draw a parallel here to Big Brother. We've all watched the Big Brother experiments where they move a brand new housemate into the house, and all of a sudden the whole house goes into uproar and it starts splitting into factions. I think that's down to psychology, and I believe you have a degree in this, don't you, David, or a PhD? So you might be better placed to answer this one, but I think it's down to human nature, and that will always happen. It happened before, and it will continue.
Yeah, but I think as property investors, then I think we need to sort of cover ourselves by showing that we've used reasonable endeavours to safeguard and to reassure the existing people in the house that we're not moving in some kind of dangerous psychopathic virus sufferer. And so one way to do that, I think, would be to get them to, first of all, I would be in favour of explaining the sort of procedures that I did at the beginning of the video to the HMO tenants. Maybe put something up in the hall to say, going up the stairs go on the left, and going down the stairs go on the right, or whatever it's necessary, to explain social distancing and to explain the measures that they can do to protect themselves. But then in terms of people moving in, I think we can reassure the other. We can ask people, and we have to rely on people's honesty. Have you been recently visited a high infection area for this virus? Have you, as far as you know, been in contact with other people? Are you showing any symptoms? And only if they tick no in these boxes, I think, is it reasonable to move them into the house and make this documentation available to the other occupiers to show that we've done the best that we reasonably can.
Yeah. No, I would totally agree with you. And I think this comes down to communication, policies, and basically put in what I call a decent set of housemates guide to living harmoniously with your fellow housemates. Book guides up in each house, and being there as a listening ear and supportive when you need to be.
Yes, and now more than ever, because I think I know there are a lot of property owners who refer to their tenants as customers, because we are involved in a people business. It is customer service, and those of us who serve will be rewarded with customer loyalty, which means people staying longer and a better experience for everyone. The final thing with HMOs before we skip on quickly to serviced accommodation is looking at new opportunities. Perhaps that there are new opportunities in HMO to change the occupier type, maybe talking to local councils about long leases, for example, for people in the key professions, or letting it out for kind of social care, possibly to give us longer term stability in our properties.
No, well, I do that sort of thing in my businesses anyway. Longer term leases, it gives stability to your business. And at times like this, when we have a lockdown and the statements being made about payment deferrals and stuff, my long-term leases are coming really good. So my cash flow is holding up.
Absolutely. And now I'm going to try and do something dangerous at the moment and share the screen again for a second. So I'm sure it will go like the last time. So we are looking at this one. Let's take a quick look. So the next thing on the agenda is serviced accommodation, which has become very popular of late, and the sort of issues that we might be addressing in respect of that. Similarly, ways to get VAT down to reduce booking fees, ways of negotiating with and being proactive. Looking at our underperformers and possibly repurposing them, processes for sanitizing, and similarly, again as before, possibly getting some key workers in kind of extreme circumstances. So first of all, in terms of SA, certainly your turnover is going to be high, and even if you've got a few of these, you're going to approach the VAT threshold, aren't you? Now there's a flat rate VAT scheme, isn't there, that we can bring in?
Well, I was going to say, with regards to service accommodation, I think almost round about four properties, any more than that, and you start going through the VAT threshold. Now, if you go through the VAT threshold, that's 20% of your selling price that goes to the VAT man. So your margin just goes straight through the floor. So how can you reduce that? Well, we can't get rid of it. But what we can do, if our threshold is, and forgive me off the top of my head because budgets change frequently, roughly about £225,000, there is another threshold. And if your VAT is above the VAT threshold but below that, there's what's called the small business threshold, which is a 10% VAT rate. It's an arbitrary 10%. So that could keep cash in your pocket and allow you to basically add probably another 6 to 8 properties before you go into the full 20% bracket. And at that point, I'd be asking the question, really, what is best for my business? To go for growth in number of units or to maximize profitability on a smaller number of units, so I'm doing less work but getting a higher return on my investment. So I would look at it from that point of view.
Yes, I agree. I mean, that is a sensible ceiling, and at that point, we also we both optimize our SA business and we diversify into other income streams as well through different companies, doing different things in different areas. And then there's the sort of up to 20% fee that we pay to Airbnb and Booking.com and this kind of thing. This is another big wodge that comes out of it. So perhaps we can encourage repeat bookings. We can have a website. We can offer a discount. We can maybe split that VAT thing halfway with the customers and try and incentivize people to book directly.
Absolutely. I mean, everything you can do to slash costs is really key in your business. So I think some great tips there from David. I don't operate serviced accommodation. The simple reason I don't operate it, I'm not a hotelier, and I would rather do larger transactions, dealing business to business, than dealing business to consumer and dealing with all of the consumer-related issues that come with that type of business. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So, well, perhaps we'll just run through the SA thing quite quickly then. So, kind of by negotiating with local employers, you can do deals that there will be, and this is why it's worth talking to people coming and where you come from and this kind of thing, and then going back to source and talking to the employers and try to get some longer term deals. If they've got constantly management consultants coming in or people with shovels coming in or whatever it is, do a deal where you offer them a cheaper rate for repeat business, which is always kind of a good thing. And proactively in our area, we can look for new infrastructure projects. If they're building that road, there are going to be a lot of short-term people who are going to be coming in and out, who will be looking for sort of accommodation. We can look at our SA units one by one, and the technical term that I'm going to bring in here, which you might not have heard of, is ditch the dogs, so that the underperformers are either repurposed or sold or given back to the owners, and we concentrate on the ones that are really good. And it's important to set thresholds so we know which side of that. I mean, I've got a friend who's got more than 150 units, and one of them was bringing in I think it was about £5 a month. So I said, perhaps it's time to think of to reconsider your involvement in that particular one. And I'm happy to say that he followed my advice, and he went through the whole portfolio and got rid of, I think, somewhere between a third to a quarter of them, which was kind of sensible. There's a health and safety aspect with service accommodation with all these changeovers. There are ways to clean the premises. One is a kind of UV type machine, which looks a bit like something out of Doctor Who, and it's got a great big thing coming up the center, and it zaps the entire room with UV for a quarter of an hour. That's good. There are fogging machines where you can put chemicals, which again will absolutely zap everything in that flat, not leaving anything toxic. You can't have your workers in the room while you're doing it, because it will zap them. So either you retrain your staff, or you get a specialist company in to do this, and a consequence of that might be that you don't want to accept one-day bookings because it's a bit of a pain. So you might have a threshold of minimum 3 days stay or something like this. And again, summing up with what we said about HMOs as well, try and get key workers in, because that will be an evergreen demand. And there are sectors where there's a lot of short-term accommodation needed. If Tesco suddenly recruit 200,000 extra packers or whatever, they're going to have to stay somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I would sort of, bringing this back to cycles and property cycles, I would see service accommodation as out of flavour for quite some time. I think people are not going to be going out. They're not going to be doing short stays away. And the demand in this sector is going to plummet quite considerably. Would you agree with that, David? For at least the next 9 to 12 months?
Yes, I would agree with it. Especially in the context of the graph that I showed at the beginning, if you remember, where the most likely outcome for UK PLC is lockdown till June and then social distancing for the rest of the year, which kind of rather knocks it all on the head.
It certainly does.
The same applies to restaurants and hotels, and all these kinds of businesses where traditionally, close proximity with people has been quite important. Next slide coming up. Let's see what we've got. We have got this one, which we will now head over to, there's this another sort of hot chestnut at the moment is the business of rent to rent, which back in my day, because I'm very elderly, we used to call subletting. There are some issues to look at here, negotiating with the owners of these tenancies, which we'll drill down on, minimizing voids, possibly reducing rents in some cases, again, getting rid of the underperformers, and setting up distancing in HMOs, sanitizing serviced accommodation, and again, targeting key workers and possibly big employers. So if we could just sort of rattle through those quickly, because there are a lot of similarities now in the things that we're kind of discussing. Now, I'm quite in favor of this strategy. Let me run this past you. That you own this building where I've offered you a guaranteed rent, and now I'm going to come and have a chat to you. Now you're the negotiation king, so you're going to tell me whether this works or not. Negotiation 101. This is Andrew, and I'm going to say, look, we live in very difficult times. We're both up against it at the moment. Could I suggest that for the next few months we change our business model so that rather than, if you like, subletting this from you, we revert to some kind of management agreement whereby we share the money coming in on a percentage split? How would that work? Where if I were to offer you that as the owner, how would you view something like that?
I would probably firstly look at the original agreement. And the original agreement, lots of people go around and I hear people pitching to do rent to rent. What's the guarantee? What's it underpinned by? Are they putting their personal assets on the line? Generally speaking, people are getting into rent to rent because they don't have personal assets. And if somebody came to me having pitched at me that they can guarantee the rent, and then they're coming back to renegotiate with me and saying, things are not working so well at the moment, we'll take a share of the profits. And by the way, the profits have nosedived. The rent guarantee I gave you is actually worthless. I would question it personally, and I would evaluate my options at this point. Number one, I think is it a Section 4 notice to basically take over the tenancies and kick the operator out? Number two, do I want the hassle? If I want the hassle, then yeah, I might undertake that activity. Number three, is there an alternative operator who will put their house on the line? So if they don't perform, they can do it. Number three, number four, I'd probably remind them of the initial agreement and any penalty clauses in there, which is, thank you very much for upgrading my property, but you're in breach, you're about to lose it. Therefore, they might turn around and go, actually, we'll find the money from somewhere and go borrow the money from somebody to keep you going. So okay. I would play hardball and I'd look at other options, and potentially before kicking them out the door, I would explore those options and have an A, B, C, D in place that I can fall back on. And if I've got no A, B, C, D, I might accept your offer, David.
So let's turn the whole thing on its head now. And I'm the shrewd property investor, and you're the impecunious rent-to-renter. What would you offer me? Because it's great to look at this from both sides.
Oh, it is absolutely.
You weren't expecting that.
No. I expect everything. And with you, David, I know we always have a lot of fun. And expect the unexpected with David.
Yeah, but I think that's a valid point, isn't it? I think it's a very good, because a lot of people here will be on the other side of the thing, and they'll want to say, well, what the heck can I do? My revenues have plunged to 30% of what they were last month. In the case of Primark, it's gone from 650 million to 0 a month.
Yeah. Well, I think firstly, what I would be looking at if I was the renter and I was negotiating with David, who's the savvy, sharp, shrewd landlord that he is, I would be saying, David, listen, we've had a good relationship for quite a number of years, haven't we? Now, I'm in a sticky position here, and we've got two choices. Either you can have nothing, and would you like to have nothing coming in this month? And David's going to come back with a no. And I'll come back with, I sense that doesn't sound attractive to you. Well, if that doesn't sound attractive, we need to come up with a way of working together to find a solution. I've lost this much in revenue. And if you're open and you've built a good relationship and your payment track record is solid with that landlord, then you are in a position to say, listen, I've got a downturn in 20% of my revenue. Would you help me out with a 20% haircut short term which I will make back up to you in the longer term. Now, I can actually give a case study here. The day that Rishi Sunak announced the payment holiday in his terms, which is actually a payment deferral, I, through one of my businesses, we manage contracts for others. And the landlord of that business relies upon us to look after their interests. One of the operators came to us and said, Rishi Sunak said I can have a payment holiday. We're having a payment holiday. And I went, I'm not going to give you a payment holiday on behalf of the landlord because you've been late with a couple of payments, you failed to communicate on either of those occasions, and you turned your phone off. You pay it or you're in breach of contract, and that contract will be pulled within 7 days as per the terms of the contract. So I played a little bit of hardball. Midnight on the day the rent was due, 1 minute past midnight, the rent dropped in the account. And you have to basically look at relationships there. So don't be taken prisoner, but always do good business with good people. And if somebody's turning out not to be doing good business, cut them off.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But, yeah,
I'm with you. But you know, but as I say, if you've got a relationship with people, this is my point. If it's been going on a while, if everybody's been working well, the tenant may well have invested some money to bring the thing up to scratch, and so you know, and a lot of landlords will have done this because they don't want to hassle the property owners. So kind of, you know, there may be some opportunities perhaps to do a bit of negotiating. Now we're coming on to one of your big areas of expertise, so I'll have to stay completely stum while we're talking about this one. The world of commercial property and the possible opportunities that there might be there for people in the new and changing world. I had a few very brief and sort of modest thoughts about this, and perhaps we can discuss all of these. One would be opportunities to convert commercial space, providing it's in good location, to residential use. The other being sort of micro offices for people who suddenly don't need the whole floor of the building, but need something that's below the rate threshold and so forth. Warehouses, because I don't think Jeff Bezos has got them all, although he's got most of them. Data centers, because we're all on, and interestingly, although we're on Zoom at the moment, some investors made a bit of a mess recently when they invested in a company I think called Zoom Technologies, and the shares shot through the roof before being suspended on the way down because it had no connection with Zoom at all. But if they invested in the right Zoom company, they doubled their money. And then we saw announced recently, didn't we, for hotels and the like, temporary PD rights, whereby if you let councils use them, they can be turned into temporary hospitals and self-isolation things and this kind of thing. I believe, I think I'm right in saying that those rights are in place for the rest of the year. So that was just a few random things off the top of my head, but I will now defer to your expertise.
Yeah, well, commercial to resi, definitely the big strategy of the next 12 months. Why do I say that? Well, going back to property cycles, prices are going to fall. Because prices are going to fall, and why will prices fall? Let's go back to the bare fundamentals. As consumers, if we're buying houses, we need jobs, we need steady income, and we need deposits. If we've all been in lockdown 5 weeks and 2 days now, we are probably eroding into our savings because of the fact that we don't have as much income coming in if we've been on 80%, possibly. Therefore, and specifically, this will affect self-employed people who will be eroding into their savings. So what I'm suggesting here is that deposit monies that buyers have will be smaller. Therefore, because deposit monies are smaller and the housing market has been stopped almost in its tracks during this window, and it's likely not to get fully going immediately to come out of lockdown as well, there's going to be a lot of people who are stressed sellers. Other sellers will sit there and go, no, I'm not too worried, I can wait a while. But the buyers that are there are also slightly stressed in that their deposits are less. So they will have less money to buy, so that's going to cause prices to plummet. I would predict probably around 10%. Now, what about the commercial sector? Well, we've seen a lot of businesses really struggle because David's just mentioned Primark have lost 650 million in 1 month. Now, if they've got less money, they're going to want to try and make that back up. Now, yeah, they've got a few business loans, grants coming in, business rates, grants, C-bills, and various stuff to take some of the financial pressure off. But their businesses are going to struggle a little bit. Also, businesses, as entrepreneurs, and I'm doing this right now live as we speak, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, how do I need to change my business going forward to make it more profitable, more robust, more streamlined, And as a result of all of that, businesses are going to change. So businesses and business premises, when they have voids, they tend to be bigger and they tend to be there for longer. But that is going to lag the residential marketplace, which will pick up much quicker. And I predict probably a 9 to 12 month lag in the housing market where prices drop and then they recover again. Commercial is probably going to be a 2-year lag. Now, because residential is going to recover quicker than commercial, I would be looking at buildings that I can convert to residential to make my returns on investment on. And that's where I would put my focus on that particular side of things, because the residential floor space price will grow in value faster than the commercial floor space price. So I hope that answers economic cycles wise and the commercial to resi, why I would be doing that.
Yes,
and because of the permitted development rights on commercial to resi being in place, and all you need to do is satisfy the criterion, you're not going for a full planning permission. I've done these in less than a month, and Christmas was in that window as well, from time of application to actually getting the letter in my hand off the council. It's almost a no-brainer of a strategy.
Absolutely, fair enough. So we touched on. I threw a few more things into the mix. So small offices. Do you think there's a sort of HMO version of offices, but as offices? Do you think there's some scope for that for businesses that don't need the floor space anymore?
I would agree with you, and I think that is going to be the growth area over the next decade. That would be my hot tip for the next decade. Business HMOs is what I would term it, or serviced offices is another term that it could be used as. And why? Well, let's have a look at it. Businesses, as entrepreneurs, we're all running small businesses. In serviced offices, you've got your own discrete, secure premise that is your office. We're not needing as much space. I touched on this earlier. We haven't got the great big filing cabinets and the papers because we're doing our accounts in the cloud. We're doing all of our, David and I have been sharing this presentation via Google Docs. No, there are other online cloud solutions out there before anybody says I'm promoting things. But all of these are going to be making people require less space. They're also going to require less employees. Desks are smaller. We're talking 1,200 by 600 desks and 1,200 by 500 and 400 desks, as opposed to the old 1,800 by 600 or 900 desks. So we're talking smaller desks, less filing cabinets. People are not printing as much. There's not as much paper. So people will require less office space. The smaller offices, serviced offices, will be in vogue. VoIP is there as a telephony system. I've been using it since 2005. It works brilliant. So the phone follows you wherever you go. It's the thing of the future in property investing, in my opinion.
Yes, and I'm with you on that one. I think there's a lot of scope there for moving forward. So now, what about warehouses? Because increasingly, even the small suppliers here in Cambridge are starting to deliver, and people are kind of realizing the value of this. I mean, I used to look quite amused or bemused, if you like, at my neighbours getting all these parcels outside their door all the time. But now I've started getting it as well, and obviously I disinfect them before they go in now, and the delivery guys, I don't know if you found this as well now, they stand about 5 meters away, because I'm well scary looking, and they just take a photo on their camera of me with the parcel, and I give them a thumbs up, and that's so all this has changed. But if I need something now, I'm ordering it online, and so that stuff, so not all this stuff comes from Amazon, so some of it comes locally.
Yeah, no, it absolutely. Tin sheds are going to be a growth area, because manufacturing needs tin sheds, generally speaking, and also delivery warehouses. If you think of FedEx, TNT, DHL, Task Force, other brands do exist as well, just can't mention them all. They all need a great big tin shed. And you'll see these little white vans, red vans, yellow vans, driving around the street during the day, buzzing about, dropping parcels off in the morning, in the afternoon picking them up. They go back to a tin shed, they put them on conveyor belts, they get sorted, and then they get routed into what they call trunkers, great big Pantechnic and articulated lorries. And then they go off to another tin shed, they're offloaded and sorted and put on white vans to go out the next day in a new area. So that is a growth area, along with companies, Amazon, Clipper, and others that do exist out there, which basically are storage sheds for boxes that couriers come and pick up and are picked, packed, sorted, and shipped out to you who's bought the items on the internet. So that is going to be a growth area, and I think the market is going to split. There's going to be ginormous warehouses and then small sheds for engineering. And I don't think the middle market is going to exist. So the opportunity here actually exists to take those middle-sized sheds and split them into smaller ones, or conjoin them with other ones to make larger sheds.
Yes. And another little thing that has just occurred to me is that in high streets now, I think permitted development rights will enable you to do the ground floor as well, provided you keep a little bit of retail at the front. Am I right in that?
You are right, provided there isn't an Article 4 restricting that permitted development right. And at the moment, what we call primary high street, so if there's a Marks and Spencer's, at Boots, major household brand names that we would typically see on a high street, those high streets, generally speaking, have the Article 4 restriction, which removes the permitted development right to do commercial to resi, an A1 to a C3 or an A2 to a C3 type use. To talk technical planning jargon, sorry. So what I would say is that is going to be one of the things that we need to consider.
And as like in a shopping centre, you've got your anchor tenant. Well, these are effectively your high street anchor tenants. If those guys pull out, then maybe there's a bit more flexibility there, and we will see downsizing of stores. We will. It'll only be in the sort of
absolutely
in the affluent metropolitan areas, perhaps. Now, data centres is that going to be a growth area, because they have to be put somewhere?
They do have to be put somewhere, but data centers, I mean, they typically rely on 1U racks, about 2 centimeters thick, and it's just loads of cables. There is a need for datacom centers, but it's how big an economy are we? And when we look at the telephony, the BT racks that already exist, I don't think it's a growth market. It's a niche market, is how I would frame it.
Fair enough. We'll look at that. So then we've got the temporary PD rights to help out hotels and the like until Christmas. I mean, for people who are probably going to be seeing the trade sort of evaporate, is that a lifeline for them, do you think?
I think it certainly is, and I'm aware of several hotels that are being used as that. I talk with directors in councils, and they are confirming that they are using this. Yes.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. So we're nearly approaching
But
the end.
it is
So
short term. Don't forget, it is short term.
absolutely. So kind of, I'm now going to take a quick hop across to Future City, where I'm going to share the view from my window. There's actually a Facebook group at the moment that has the view from their window, which people are sharing from all around the world, but they didn't find mine interesting enough to actually include on the group. Although I submitted one because I live facing a car park, which is not terribly exciting. But this is what I would like to have as the view outside my window, kind of moving forward. And I think we are entering a brave new world. A lot of the old established and hackneyed business practices, frankly, which should have all disappeared on the 1st of January 2000, will probably be now swept under the carpet. But what notable things, what notable changes do we think we'll see, not just in our society, but in our property sector, but sort of across society as a whole? And what might the impact be?
Well, that's a cracking question, David. I mean, where do you start? Because you basically give me a blank sheet of paper and said, redesign society. Phenomenal.
Absolutely. I mean, I can offer a few thoughts of my own if that helps. So
what are your thoughts first then? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I mean, I've got a few thoughts on how things are going to change, and let's go with yours first, because I think I've shared some of mine with you before anyway, haven't I?
I would imagine, but if I do flag it up, because I often forget who told me stuff, and then I might tell you back something you told me already. So feel free to take ownership if I jump in on anything you've said either today or on other occasions. I see our lives as being changed forever, and like, for example, we can make much more efficient use of our time. We're not sitting on the train for 2 hours in the morning every evening. We're not sitting on the train for 2 hours coming back. Now, there's a question of who owns those 4 hours a day. Is it the employer? Is it us? Do we kind of split it down the middle? And I think there'll be a huge push now from employees, and I'm sure that legislators will help with this, to wherever possible work from home. So sell those shares in the railway companies and all that sort of stuff, because whoa, I mean, I've got the geriatric, I call it my geriatric rail card, but I've torn it up now because although it's paid for them, and alongside my 2020 diary plan, and I just threw them out the window one afternoon because they're not going to be used anymore. So sell shares in diary companies as well. So that is a big change. We might. I advise not to use those 4 hours a day for just working. I advise to use that as me time. So chill, develop a new hobby, stay in touch with friends. You see, that's an important thing. And people, one fella, I do this evening broadcast with my wife every day for an hour where we just talk about stuff to sort of raise the spirits. It's a bit like sitting in the old Tin Anderson shelter during the Blitz, which I'm sure you and I remember, and singing Vera Lynn songs and all that kind of thing. So it's our sort of online equivalent to that. And one of the guys who signed up with there, we had a Zoom call the other day. I haven't seen him since we worked out 1981, and suddenly we're having a good old chat as if and I reconnected very importantly with my 89-year-old uncle, who is he's shouting over the fence to his neighbor at the moment because they used to go around for tea once a week, and his son is bringing in the shopping, and I showed the son how to wash those bananas in the sink with soap and water. I quite literally do that. Well, I outsource that bit to Irma, but I'm bringing the things from the hallway into the kitchen, and we've got a whole factory kind of going there. So I think we've got the opportunity. I was speaking in Wolverhampton the other day, and then half an hour later I was on the radio in Cambridge. We can zip around the country, and those look, it's not very exciting sitting for 6 hours in the car or for 3 hours on the train or whatever. So we can repurpose that time. We can can have some self-improvement lessons, and we can sort of think about the meaning of life and all that kind of thing. So I think in the personal sense, people will discover that the day of the 12-hour day, you don't have to be spending 4 of them kind of squished up like that in a tube train. That there are better things.
Yeah.
I think
I think you're spot on right with that. I mean, I would sort of to bring it back to property cycles.
Yes.
What I would look at, if we go back to the 80s, we had vibrant high streets. If we went forward to the 90s, we started to develop these out-of-town shopping centres. In the 2000s, the high street started to die. And in the 2010s, we had the onset of what I call the home delivery service, where we all jumped on the internet and bought stuff. What I predict is there's going to be a lot of repropositioning of different areas. So the high streets are going to struggle. And I personally think they need to be repropositioned and repurposed. And it's going to be hard in some areas, because if you take a Debenham store, it's a massive, great store. It's got some windows on the ground floor and all the way up the one face of the building. And then there's no other windows for light. So buildings like that, I think, need to be demolished and the area redeveloped. So it's quite dramatic. Out-of-town shopping centres, some of them are becoming ghost towns anyway now. Now, what I would say with the out-of-town shopping centres is let's look at them and let's repurpose them. And those are effectively tin sheds. So could be places for Amazons or engineering companies or distribution companies to base themselves. So we need to have a look at what we've got as infrastructure and look at repropositioning to fit a modern society.
Now, it's easy to look on Google and to find in the US out-of-town shopping centers completely deserted with brush rolling along the thing and palm trees growing out of the middle of the pavements and this kind of thing. So this is a danger. This is a danger. And Mr. Bezos is not known for lack of competitiveness. So he will see this as an area to expand his operation even further. And the out-of-town retail centres superseded the high street because their cost base was lower. The rates were a lot lower and so forth, and they exploited that opportunity. Well, the same happened with these automated warehouses with only one person running them and robots doing everything. They take things to the next level even further, and subject to having a place behind the bins where they can leave it during the day when you're out. That was always the thing, but we're going to be home now, so and we're going to have these drones dropping things in our garden. And I was in Milton Keynes recently, and I saw their robots going up and down the street, and they've got sort of they can protect themselves against people like me coming along and nicking some old lady's shopping, because they make flashing lights and alert the police and all this kind of thing. So these are quite secure mechanisms. So I do see a massive shift now to online. I remember a website, again, you probably wouldn't have been your kind of thing. Oh, oops, something took a tumble there. There's a website called boo.com in the very early days of online, and they were a fashion retailing company, and they had some remarkable technology which would enable them to rotate the shirts and this kind of thing, and you could zoom in and out of the clothes and almost touch the stock that they had. But nobody had computers that were, or internet connections that were fast enough to avail themselves of this tech, and so the thing went down the pan rather rapidly. Well, now most of us do have fast internet. That there are one or two exceptions that I know, but you know, so the whole online experience can become much more immediate, and I don't see any reason now not to shop at home. And I was such a Luddite. I was going into the bank every week with my rent books and all that, and, you know, tipping the coins on the counter and all that, and that stopped. And I had to do online banking and all that. I've got it all set up now, and it's freeing up my time. I mean, I was probably the last person in England to do that. But you know, if even someone like me is stepping up to the plate now, I think increasingly our out-of-town spaces will come under pressure, and they might be repurposed as leisure parks or something like this. It won't necessarily be in the ways we imagine.
No, I would wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying, and that's why I say we need to have a look at businesses, sectors, and land that the uses it's been historically used for are dying. And if we take pubs, for example, and this is a prediction of mine that planning rules are going to be relaxed over the next 12 months, whereas historically you've had to prove that no viable pub can operate from a site. What is going to happen over the next 12 months is the government are going to want to kickstart this economy. They're going to want to get a lot of things going. There's going to be a lot of incentives. And whereas we might be trying to hold on to a legacy, a history, a past of having a pub on the street corner that everybody pops down to, it might have been shut for 6-9 months and nobody's taken over. Because if you understand the pub business model, it's not in favour of the person who's operating the pub on the local corner. It's in favour of the major breweries and the brands that are operating and giving out the leases. They're massive landlords making money off the real estate and some money off the beer. But we won't go into that debate. But those sites, I think the moratorium on developing until you've proven there's a business case and you've tried and public objections, I think the permitted development rights will be extended into things like dormant pubs, which can be converted quickly into residential.
And we might see more micro pubs as well, which works quite well, and which is a good compromise where you've got this big sprawling thing with 3 customers. Now, if you make it small, it seems full with 3 customers. You only need 3 parking spaces. So you can build something in the form of car park, and you can turn all the rest of it into accommodation. So that, compromises might be struck. I know people who've done that. That may become far more popular in that sector, for example.
Yeah, no, I mean, the world is changing, and I think what we've got to do is look at things and say, just because it's always been like that, and in negotiation I always say don't use the word why, because it puts your defences up, but in this instance, ask yourself the question, why are we protecting an empty, derelict pub? The fabric of the building is declining. Yes, it was nice in its day, but if it was viable, it would be trading. It's not viable. Move on. Now let's repurpose it. Let's have a look at what we can do with that real estate. So, let's not chuck the baby out with the bathwater, but let's be realistic and let's be futuristic here.
Absolutely. I think that's the big takeaway, isn't it? And I need to share this screen very, very quickly. I don't know if you're a Trekkie, but this is a thing that struck me the other day, because we're getting on to slightly different areas now, that the origin of Mr. Spock's famous expression played by the actor Leonard Nimoy, live long and prosper. There was an episode that I think was called Sitting on the Edge of Forever, where they travel back in time and meet Joan Collins, and it's quite a good episode. But here we see them going back to the year 2020, and 5 minutes later, nope, we'll pass on that one. But there will, in the future, I think we will all live long and prosper. I think I'm a great fan of the expression fall down 7 times and stand up 8. That's my watchword. I mean, we all have our knocks, but what distinguishes successful people from less successful people is how they respond to these challenges, and challenges are always upon us. It's something that happens.
David, I'll let you get knocked over 7 times and stand up 8. I'm a weeble. I never fall over.
Oh my goodness!
And I'm back up again.
That's wonderful. So just get knocked to one side a little bit. And, if I see a great big
joke for the older members of the audience there, that was.
Well, but as I'm going down the big highway of life, when I see the big steaming compost heap right in the middle of the road, I don't, as some people do, get a teaspoon and move it all across to the side of the road a little bit at a time. I just go round it. So kind of thing. I think we're very much on the same page there, and I'm sure you love my analogies that
absolutely.
I have a habit of using there. Now we've come to the sort of guest spot part of the evening.
I can't wait for our guest. Shall I introduce our guest speaker here?
Well, what I need to do first, if I may, very briefly. Oh, and I've just lost the screen there again, which I'm quite good at doing. Right, so we'll just repurpose that one and step back. I think 1 or 2 slides. No, yep, here we are. So this is about staying sane, because we're all cooped up one way or another, and it's like being in a sort of open prison, isn't it? Really, except without the day release. And and I will see if the guest speaker is available right now. So if you'll just talk for about 30 seconds. If the guest speaker is not available, I will present this thing.
The guest speaker is definitely available. That you must be able to find them.
I will see what I can do, because the guest speaker is on another call, but it may have finished.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you might have heard of a gentleman called Tony Robbins, and Tony Robbins is all about mindset and focus and so forth. Now, our guest speaker, who will hopefully be joining us very shortly, is somebody who hasn't actually followed Tony Robbins, but actually coached Tony Robbins, and has got some phenomenal mindset stuff to share with you. So I would like you all to give a massive warm welcome to David Clouter, who is going to share with you some phenomenal stuff. I was with Irma last night, virtually, of course, and I was actually quite pleased and surprised by some of the information that was being shared. And Irma, would you care to share with our audience?
Can you make Irma's screen big? Do you have that technological
that's
capability?
fine. I'm good. I'm good.
To make Irma into the full screen? Do we have to do that?
Yeah, I think I can do that. Where we make you the main speaker. There we go.
Oh dear.
Okay. So
fabulous.
So thank you, Andrew, for inviting me over. I have just been on a Zoom call, so I'm completely taken aback, but thank you for this opportunity. This is something that David and I have been working, and that's how we actually got together. First, you have to find someone that is really aligned to your values and to set of values. And so basically what we say, and I will have to read this, is you matter because you are a survivor, alive and with your foot on the accelerator, ready to take off and to discover new uncharted roads. Be passionate, find your passion and make it purpose in your life. Be positive, value and make the most of every day and every opportunity, however small, that comes your way. Be alive, every day is a fresh start because you are still standing firm with your family and those nearest to your heart. Be grateful. Remember, long gone are the days in which travel times or physical proximity could separate you from your loved ones. Relate to your family. Could not be any closer because you have now identified who matters the most in your life. So now is your time. Connect for the first time in history, because we now, for the first time, we live in a totally connected world. Your greatest assets is the people on your network. We all face the same challenges. True connections, valuable insights, and shared values empowers us all. Network, the people who support your dreams matter, even if it is to give you a sense of reality of your dreams being too big. Sometimes we need that people that's gonna tell us, this is how it works, and be listened to, pay an ear, and to be open to all possibilities that there are. Reset your life and surround yourself at all times with the people that really are gonna back you up, are gonna really push you, are really gonna show you the realities of your life, are really gonna put the table into you and say, this is how it is, and this is how it could be. And whatever comes your way in terms of communication, you have to adapt it to your own way, to your own personality, to your own values. If someone comes to you and it doesn't feel right in mind, heart, and spirit, you can't just bless and carry on your life, because you have to really be true to your values. So relate, connect, enjoy, manage your time effectively, take ownership of your day and your future. If you're in business, life, family, personal relationships, just manage it and enjoy. Fasten your seatbelts and enjoy the ride, because we are gonna be in a very nice place. So thank you, Andrew.
You are very welcome, Irma. Sorry. I shall get that right.
Irma.
Irma, yes. Sorry, I learned to pronounce Irma's name yesterday correctly because I've been saying it wrong for a very, very long time, and I had to apologise. So I'm still
No, no,
getting
no, no, no.
my programming right in my mind as to that. But I think you've said some really salient points there and shared those with everybody because it's important that people consider their mental wealth, their mental state, and also look after themselves and the others around them in order that we can survive this period of lockdown. I know the event I ran on Monday night, I put out an appeal and a request for the RNIB because they are not able to run any of their charitable fundraising events. Go to rnib.org.uk. On their homepage, they've got a donation page if you're able to give something, because they've increased the amount of services that they are providing. They have increased the amount of support they're providing, but they've got no money coming in, a bit like Primark, because all of their events have stopped. And they're not getting grants, they're not getting anything from government, and they're really starting to struggle. So I appreciate the NHS and lots of other organisations are doing a fantastic job. I've supported that organisation for 12 years, and basically close your eyes and now imagine that's the rest of your life. And try and go shopping, as an example, with your eyes closed. Try and do internet shopping with social distancing. It becomes very difficult. So they're doing a tremendous job for hundreds of thousands of people who are blind and visually impaired. So the point you make is very, very, very relevant, Irma.
That's correct. That's correct, Andrew. And you are right. They are the small charities and so valuable for people. And these charities close to our hearts. One day we'll share some information, these things. But I used to work for a company called Dawson Books, no longer exists in Northamptonshire. So they were one of the biggest supporters that RNIB had in that area in terms of books. And now Dawson Books is no longer in Northamptonshire. They moved to Norwich, and that was taken over by Smith's News PLC. So yes, you're right. If we can connect with small charities, in this case, the NIB, yes, let's go for it. And just as much or as little as you can give, it will be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Andrew. You. I'll pass you to the main speaker, Shanti.
Thank you. Have an awesome day, Irma. Thank you for the guest appearance.
Wasn't that wonderful, Andrew?
That was phenomenal. And I will put your comments in the comments boxes as to what you got from that, and we'll feed that back through to Irma later.
So that's
David, where are we up to? We're almost at the end now.
Yeah, that was kind of the end as such, apart from like the summing up and the takeaway from both of us. So who wants to go first?
Well, should we do some audience questions first?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's even better. Totally.
Forgive me for referring to the device. I mean, Susan said wise words from Irma. So positive. Thank you. Going down the list, we've got a question here from Jay. Thoughts on viability of warehouses divided up into multiple ghost kitchens for takeaways? I think the answer to Jay would be it is a possibility, but you may need a planning permission from change of use, because most warehouses are B1s. Depending on how the kitchens are perceived, it may need to change to an A3 or an A5, possibly an A5 use. So it's worth exploring as an opportunity. We've got comments there: business HMOs, serviced offices, loving the cross feeding. I've got cyber. Do we think if there's a vaccine that demand for HMOs and isolation will carry on? What's your thoughts on that one, David?
I think, well, I think it's why do people go into HMOs? I mean, that's what we think we want to think about. Is it for the sort of for the sense of community? Probably not, because in HMOs that I've run in the past, you know, the kitchen is just there's kind of the only place you meet the other tenants, really. Most people have got quite busy lives, and so they just sort of come in and out, and there's not that sort of deep level of interaction. So I think, you know, the reason that people come to live in HMOs, I think, is principally one of economics, because as house prices have risen, the affordability thresholds have become much more difficult for people, and so I think HMOs have traditionally been a stepping stone for people starting out on the property ladder, if you like. Now, if we see, and we didn't really talk about this, are we going to see some kind of short-term adjustment of values here moving forward of properties? Because if we take that in tandem with possibly people's reluctance to go into, see, moving forward, maybe if for just a little bit more money you can get a studio flat rather than an HMO, maybe that will become more attractive to people. So I think the jury's out on that one. We'll have to see how bad this gets, and I think, you know, we are plateauing now, and provided that the government manages it effectively now, and that's by no means guaranteed given what they did thus far, but I think they are getting I think they're getting a handle on it now, to be fair. So kind of, if all this, and if the University of Oxford comes up with their vaccine, with 1 million doses of their vaccine by October, which they have said, they said on Andrew Marr on Sunday, great show, they said that there's an 80% chance that will happen, again provided the government makes the manufacturing part of it work, because what they want to do, which is quite clever really, you'd expect that from Oxford, wouldn't you? Quite clever, that at the same time as they're testing people, they want to start putting the stuff in place to manufacture it, putting that infrastructure in place, so that in the event that it works, and they think that's an 80% chance, that they can start the next day cranking the handle and turning these out at volume. So if it all becomes contained, you know, within the next 6 months, then I think we're pretty good looking forward. If it drags on into 2021, which is again is a possibility, albeit a smaller one, then I think the popularity of HMOs and this kind of thing will continue to decline. And as stuff declines, you get to the point where it sort of tips over and plummets, much like with property cycles. So, but they do recover. I'm sure. Yeah, again, you're too young to remember Rigsby from the 1980s, but that's,
I remember Rigsby. Yeah, fabulous. Rising Dam, great program.
Fabulous actor, Leonard Rossiter, and a great supporting cast, and very funny. But it was similar to the HMOs that we do right now, but perhaps not quite to the same high standards.
I think Rigsby's standard was really good, really good. Well, I'll carry on through a few of these comments. Niall said he loves the A to Z property series. He can't wait for the one that's on the moon. So,
oh, how lovely.
I put it out there. We've now got to deliver it. Jane says she uses Inspire. It's got a boost function too. Yeah, I'm familiar with the product. Beware though, because Inspire has a remote access facility. And if any of your tenants complain against you potentially altering temperature, you have to prove in front of the man with the wig on or the lady with the wig on that you didn't tinker with it. And as there's no audit log, the tenant will win. So I would say be careful, be very careful. I've put a link down below to Timerstat. I've also put a link down below on the feed to the tax that I referred to. What's the best thing? Yeah, Jane says that she's got mortgages with the old Mortgage Express and they don't do remortgages anymore. Unfortunately, what I would say is you'll pretty much either have to move off those legacy mortgages, which you probably don't want to do because they're awesome rates. Therefore, I would go for the alternate strategy, which is to put the equity up as a financial second charge for a lender, and they would be happy with that. That or it's a remortgage. Or there is another way, if you look at the incorporation through the Property 118 link, which I've sent below, or look at some of the videos, there are ways of doing that and being able to extract that cash without having to do a remortgage at all. Let me just have a look. Jay, insightful overview on mitigating risk. Well done, David. Susan's got a question on C-bill loans. I'm rattling through these questions, really, aren't I?
You are like a lightning
I'm trying
rocket.
to cover them all off. Yeah, Susan's question on C-bill loans is it doesn't apply to property businesses. Oh, sorry, it doesn't apply to investment businesses. It's only trading businesses. Well, what you have to do is be able to demonstrate that 50% or more of your revenue comes from a trading activity. So if your business just owns the property, then unfortunately that's an investment business. If you have a trading activity, for argument's sake, you might be doing lettings management. That is a trading activity. You might be a copywriter, an IT professional, an accountant. They are trading activities. So anything that you've got, if you've got a repair and maintenance business, that qualifies. So your builder would qualify for a C-bill loan. Very simple. I'll be doing a separate video on C-bill loans to help you out with an application. I've submitted myself, so I've been through the process and can share real life experience with you. So that looks to be all of the questions that we've got for today. So would you like to do a wrap up? And thank you. I've got a comment just popped up from Jay there, who says thank you very much to both of us for a phenomenal webinar. So would you like to do the wrap up?
I'll do the first wrap up, and if you feel there's anything to add after I've put my foot in it, then please do so. We're entering a whole new world here with fresh challenges and opportunities, and this has caught us all on the hop. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're Richard Branson or whoever you are. Nobody saw this coming. If you're the governor of the Bank of England, if you're the chancellor, if you're the president of the United States, it's probably not too surprising that he didn't see it coming. But whoever you are, and let's not disparage anybody in this general discussion. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, if you've got a small business, if you're running a larger business, if you're cash flow positive, if you are teetering on the edge, we are entering different times now. The rule book, the rule book that we had up to this point has been ripped up, and only there was a poll recently where people were asked if they want things to return to normal after this, and this is after we're only in week 5, and only 9% of people. This was a poll in the UK. Only 9% of people were yearning for those bygone days and wanted things to be back the way they were, and the rest of us are finding that in many ways, obviously it's a bit of a bummer not being able to sort of walk down the street and this kind of thing, and leaving the car locked up outside. But in many ways, our lives are better. And I think moving forward, we need to build on that. We've still got plenty of time to reflect, because it will be a while yet before we're out and about again and up and running. So let us use this time, the extra time that we have, to reflect on what's working, to reflect on what isn't, to think back on the life we were leading, and to build our future now for ourselves, to sit down and work out the day that front door swings open what we want to do to maximize the benefits for ourselves as people, for society for a whole as a whole, and for our lives.
I think that is very, very well said, David. I don't think I can add anything to that other than to thank you hugely for sharing property cycles, specifically how it's affecting us in COVID-19, things that you can do for your business, and exactly where we are in the property cycle, covering virtually all of the mainstream strategies. So thank you very much.
There's just time for us to give a quick plug, if we may, to something that's happening Saturday morning. Is it 10 o'clock?
Saturday morning, 10 o'clock, A to Z of property strategies. And, well, we've got some dinosaurs at Hawaiian Beach. We've got the moon coming up. We've got all sorts. So David and I work very hard at these, as does our awesome video editor, Niall. And, yeah, comment on those.
Increasingly now, as some of the more traditional models are coming up under pressure, and as people have got time at home to think about stuff they might want to do, there are more than 250 of these. So, just have a look through in between Netflix, pause the Netflix occasionally, and you might just find the thing that you're going to latch onto for the rest of your life. You never know. And if not, you'll have a lot of fun watching us larking about. But all the content is spot on the nail, just wrapped up in a nice sugary coating. but not lipid with spikes sticking out of it.
Totally agree with you. So it's going to be a different world, and I think we need to now start preparing ourselves to exit this lockdown, thinking about the future, thinking about things we'll do, how we'll interact, what family looks like, what social time looks like, what work time looks like. It's a good period of reflection. So thank you very much, everybody. It's been great to have you in our audience today. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've enjoyed it, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Don't forget, like and subscribe. And what we will be able to do is communicate with you what we have happening, or YouTube will. By doing it on YouTube, we're not asking for emails or names or anything. We don't have any of that data, so it's safe, secure for you, GDPR compliant. All we're doing is we're allowing you to keep updated on the channel. So please leave your comments below and let David know what value he's managed to share with you today. He would truly appreciate it.
Are we going to make this available as a recording for people to see after the event?
This will be made available as a recording as well, so please feel free to share on your social media with your friends and tell them the value. And if you reference specific minutes, because I'm conscious this has been a 2-hour recording, we anticipate an hour and a half, but we've sort of gone over
2 1/4. 2 1/4.
2 1/4.
But wow. Thank you for everybody who stuck with us. It's been a real honor to have people sticking with us for all this long. I've never done such a long stream in my life.
No,
it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Well, no, tell a fib. I have done a long stream. The longest one I've done was 11 hours.
Wow, that was running around the London Marathon with a camera doing a selfie, was it?
No, it was one single day of presentation that I was delivering.
That's astonishing. That's more than me. The longest ever I ever did was a 6-hour radio show for charity raising funds, and we started at 9 p.m. and finished at 3 a.m.
Congratulations.
You win, Andrew. You win. You get the prize. And there was no camera, so we were pretty laid back there in the studio by the end.
Yeah, well, I was pretty exhausted. So on that, I shall say goodbye to our audience. Thank you for sticking with us, and we hope you've enjoyed it, and we hope we've given you a lot of value there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.